So this is an anamorphic lens, specifically the Sirui Saturn 35mm t2.9 1.6x carbon fiber full frame anamorphic lens. And for the longest time, anamorphic lenses were extremely expensive. And now in 2025, you can get your hands on this one for $1,000, which I get is relatively expensive, but compared to prices of standard lenses, this is pretty on par with that value. Now, that doesn't mean that it doesn't come with any downsides. Obviously, this is not going to be as good as a $30,000 anamorphic lens, but the look you can get out of this budget anamorphic lens is great, and are just not achievable with a standard spherical lens like this. Now, I'll go over the difference between anamorphic lenses and spherical lenses in a moment, but first, let's go over this lens. So this one is a 35mm t2.9 1.6x anamorphic lens, and I opted for the Sony E-mount with the neutral flare color option. They also have a 50mm and a 75mm with a bunch of different mount options, all for $1,000 at the time of recording this video. And the best part, in my opinion, is that these are full frame, so you get full coverage on a full frame camera. And a little disclosure, Surui did send this over to me to film for review, but for free. They did not pay me for this review. Now, they do get to see the video before it goes live, but that's only to make sure that I don't mess up any of the technical specs on this lens, but they don't get to change anything I say about this lens, so take that for what you will. So this is a traditional spherical lens, my Sony 24-70 f2.8. And here's what this looks like at 35mm at 2.8 aperture. It's got your standard look, your standard aspect ratio, and your standard bokeh in the background, which essentially is the blurriness behind your subject. Now this is what the 35mm anamorphic lens looks like. Wait, why is it all smushed up? This is a 1.6 anamorphic lens. So in your editing software of choice, if you de-squeeze this image to 1.6 times, this is what you get. And here's what it looks like compared to the traditional 35mm. Right away, you can notice a huge difference starting with the aspect ratio. Traditional lenses when recording video are gonna have a 16:9 aspect ratio, filling the entire frame of this 4K video you are seeing on the screen. Now, anamorphic lenses when de-squeezed are going to be in a lot wider aspect ratios. And when you fit that in a 4K image, that's where those black bars come from, like what you see in Hollywood movies. This lens, since it's a 1.6x anamorphic, when it's de-squeezed, it's actually a 2.8:1 aspect ratio, which is a very aggressive aspect ratio in my opinion, but it creates that Hollywood look that everyone is trying to recreate in their short films or their creative projects. And even if I just simply slap two black bars on the top and bottom of a traditional spherical lens footage, it still wouldn't look the same. And that's due to a few different reasons. For one, the shape of the aperture on an anamorphic lens is more like an oval versus a traditional circle shape in a spherical lens, which is going to give you different shape bokeh, or again, the blurry background you see behind your subject, and add more of a swirl effect to it as well. The next reason is that the squeeze image that you see on screen has a lot more visual information horizontally, if that makes sense. Because of the way that the internal structure of that lens is shaped, it essentially can see a lot wider than a traditional lens. I'm trying to explain this in the simplest way possible. I'm not super scientific and I'm trying to stay in my lane, so if you want to correct me, go ahead and do it in the comments. Another huge difference between a spherical lens and an anamorphic lens is the way that they react to light. If I shine my phone light in front of this traditional lens, this is what it looks like. Now if I shot it in front of the anamorphic lens, you can see that it has a really cool flare. And that's one of the major visual characteristics of an anamorphic lens, the lens flares. You see a lot of flares in Hollywood movies, especially Michael Bay movies, and that's due to anamorphic lenses. So like I said, I chose to get the neutral flare option so that it's not as in your face as the blue flare, which is the other option for this lens. But ultimately that's just preference and you have the choice to go either way. Now I sort of brushed over this earlier, and that's de-squeezing. And whenever you use an anamorphic lens, you're gonna need to de-squeeze the image to be able to actually see what you're filming. I mean, you can use it without de-squeezing it, but you're never really gonna be able to see accurately what your final image is going to look like. In my setup, I have the Sony a7S III with this Portkeys PT6 monitor. And sadly, for some reason, the Sony a7S III does not have a de-squeeze feature. Don't understand it, but my Portkeys monitor has that option. So all I do is set my monitor to 1.6 anamorphic to see what the final image is going to look like. And when you're done filming, you're gonna want to go in your editing software and you're still gonna have to de-squeeze that footage. So for me, I'm using DaVinci Resolve. So all you'll do is go into DaVinci Resolve, right click on the clips that you want to de-squeeze, then select clip attributes and go right here to pixel aspect ratio, go up to custom and change this to 1.6 or whatever crop factor your anamorphic lens is. And then you'll immediately notice the black bars that were added on the top and bottom if you're editing in a 4K timeline. So I've actually never used an anamorphic lens before and I was excited to get my hands on this and test it out. And I really love the way that the image quality looks on this lens and the overall creative look I get versus a traditional spherical lens. Pretty much everything looks cinematic, and it really does give off that Hollywood feel to the image. Alright, now let's go over what I like about this lens. For the price of $1,000, it feels super quality. It doesn't really feel cheap, doesn't feel like plastic, and it feels like it could last a long time. And relatively speaking, I think this is a great price for an anamorphic lens. And it's really cool to see good anamorphic lenses be in this price range. Also, this is a manual focus lens, which most cinema lenses are that way. What's cool is you get these notches on the focus and aperture ring, so if you want to use a focus puller, it makes that super easy to do so. And I love how the focus has hard stops, so it makes it really easy to get accurate whenever you're focus pulling. Now, this pertains just to anamorphic lenses in general, but I love how everything looks cinematic. Now, if you're a great cinematographer unlike myself, the possibilities are endless creatively with this lens. Now, there are 3 specific things that I don't really like about this lens, but luckily I found solutions for all of them, somewhat. The first one is that the minimal focus distance is actually only 3 feet. So if you need to focus on anything closer than 3 feet, you're not going to be able to do that. So things like closer, tight shots of objects or your subject, they'll be out of focus if you're less than 3 feet away. My solution was to use what they call lens diopters. They're essentially reading glasses for your lens. I bought this set on Amazon and I'll make sure to link it below. It comes with a few different diopters depending on how close you need to be filming. So if I throw this +2 diopter on, you can see that I can get a lot closer to my subject and it'll still be in focus. And I was curious what this +10 would look like, so here's what +10 looks like, and with this one you can get really close. Here's what it looks like at 75mm on my 24-70. And that's the cool thing, is that you can use diopters on pretty much any lens you want and get that really close focus without having to have a macro lens. And the filter ring for this lens is 58mm, so I just got this 58mm to 82mm step up ring because I have some other lens filters in 82mm. And that way you can use your lens filters on pretty much any lens you have versus having to buy specific lens filters for specific lenses. Helps you save a little bit of money. Now, the only downside is that you lose infinite focus, meaning you can't really focus as far as you could before, so you can really only use these for specific shots if you're wanting to film something up close. The next downside of this lens is whenever you de-squeeze it, there's a little bit of distortion on the edges of the frame. And I assume if you go up in price on anamorphic lenses, this will probably be less likely. But the fix that I found for this, and this is specifically in DaVinci Resolve, I don't know if this is in any other editing software, but I assume you could do the same thing. So all you do is click on the clip that you want to work on, go over to the inspector tab, go down to lens correction, and I like to set mine to -0.075, but that all depends on the clip that you're working on. So anywhere between -0.05 or -0.085. Obviously, it would be nice to not have to do this on every single clip, but I think the solution looks great and you can't really tell there was distortion in the first place. Now, some people might like that distortion and argue that that's how it's supposed to look in the first place, but you do you and do what you like. Now, the last thing, and it's probably again due to the price point of this, is that there is a lot of focus breathing. So whenever I focus and defocus on an object or a subject, you can see that the image sort of zooms in and out. And that's usually what you see in cheaper lenses, but there is a workaround for this, and unfortunately, since I have the Sony a7S III, for some reason they don't want to include this feature either. Come on, Sony. In some Sony cameras at least, you can use focus breathing compensation. I believe the FX3 has this feature, and that should sort of get rid of the breathing effect you see whenever you're focusing your lens. Not a huge deal breaker, but it's good to know that there's that issue. So all in all, would I recommend this lens? 1000% yes. I think for the price and quality, this is a really good budget anamorphic lens, and it can really help you achieve some awesome looking shots on whatever creative project you're working on. I'm also tempted to use this on a client interview at some point. If there's a specific type of look that we're going for, it'd be really cool to throw this on my camera and kind of see what it would look like. So if you're interested in picking up this lens, I'll make sure to link all the different options they have below if you want to pick one up for yourself. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I plan to do a lot more gear reviews on this channel the rest of the year. We have a lot of cool stuff coming in the future too. I actually got sent a 3D printer recently, so I'm going to be making some videos about that here in the future. All right, that'll do it for this one. I'll see you guys on the next one.